Okay, the coincidental on this thing is pretty insane because I think in about 12 hours ago I was thinking about, there's about 1 million dead in about a quarter in the Ukraine war, because they say 5K. I saw recently a video, 5K on both sides every day. And then about 12 hours later, afterwards, I don't know if later is a cursed word, maybe it is, but afterwards, I'm watching this guy, and I'm posting a comment how it's coincidental. And what he's talking, he mentions 1 million, and then as I keep watching, I'm I'm putting up. It's funny. I say I don't care about the false words that much now because the AI, in order to do it, it takes forever for it to take out. So I said, okay, forget it. But I guess when I'm still talking, I'll still say false words. I don't know how it's gonna do when I converse. I really have no idea because my videos are using a ton of false words because it would take forever. The AI, I mean, it could be done, but now I'm getting much faster. That's the interesting thing is, but I need to get my parents in. The videos are still, the message still goes through. But now I've gotten so fast, maybe eventually if I acquire enough power, I can start maybe taking them out. I don't know. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's why people aren't as perfect as they are, because they use what they have. So my father being so mind-blowingly stupid is because he's doing the best he can, which is sad. Maybe that's it. Maybe I look around and I think everyone's so many people, or not everyone, but so many people are stupid, but it's only because they're working with what they got. And that's why Tom, my neighbor, is so, my gosh, the guy. I think I'm beginning to understand people. They don't have enough power. They don't have enough power, that's the whole thing. My mind is my main power. How I got to this point in my mind, I'm still trying to figure out, but there's always a balance. There's always a balance. The Bible's completely flawed, so flawed, but maybe not completely flawed, but it did get this right. Those who are paraphrasing, cursed with knowledge. All right. Anyway, so the whole point is this guy.
What you will find, for example,
and I gotta put the comment on because there's so many. Okay. So many. Okay. And again. Now you say. See, if you read this whole comment, I'm watching, and then what first was 1 million, then there's coincidal with Russia's tactic is to rush. After I mentioned rush to the moon, Russia did first, and then kept watching, and then now he says it's the population, which is one of my main things. The overpop. It's the one of the I've been saying it's the number one threat, but then you say what causes the overpop, that would be even the biggest threat from that. According to my franchise spoilers, it's the EMF. And then I was going to mention what is the drug aspect of it. Here it's alcohol. It coincides with my theory about insider trading, and then there's a dynamic. There's insider trading, and then there's a drug component here. So it's perfect. They're using the drug as a to keep the politics. My God, my brain is about to explode. Gosh, now I gotta update it with that note. Oh my gosh, I even put it on YouTube. YouTube, you gotta be careful because of this thing. Hopefully it won't. It won't know what that is, so it should be okay. This matches my theory. Insider trading, drug control. Jesus Christ. So many coincidental. Your brain is about to explode. Alright, now I gotta update. So now I gotta update. Keep update. I'm smacking up 3 ways. I mean, I'm doing triplicate backup. But I'm doing it in a way that's fast. So I got it now. The videos have gotten down. Now I've gotten down to hold on, to pretty much a low megabytes. That's perfect. 10 minutes, perfect. I did it. I actually accomplished it about an hour ago. I'm gonna put another note here. Same one copy. Wow, where's my? So it's all about, one of the keys here is speed. This one makes sense. Hold on. Got it here. There we go. I'm going to be playing his video, so you know, while I'm updating all this. But I was pondering if I even should okay, I have to delete this from here because that's not gonna make sense. Okay, no, that makes sense. That's fine. Jesus. My brain. Let me, cause it's gonna be, I gotta cut, where are you? Okay, I gotta, okay, now I can play the hum. Let's play from the beginning. Well, let's play from this part, because I don't know how many more coincidence.
From Mexico, where Russians are very concerned in particular about Chinese immigrants immigrating over the border from China into Siberia because they are afraid of China basically culturally replacing them and then maybe even changing the borders over time, doing kind of what Russia does, getting a lot of ethnic Chinese in the area and then declaring them to invade to protect them, kind of like what Russia did to Georgia and kind of like what Russia did to Ukraine. And this doesn't help Russia's immigration problem either because it explicitly kind of attacks the main population of people that actually might be interested in immigrating to Russia and populating some of its unpopulated areas. So for all these reasons and more, there are obvious incentives for people to not want to come into Russia. And at the same time, there are also obvious incentives for people to want to leave Russia. A big reason they lost so many young people after invading Ukraine. A lot of Russians are leaving the country, and in particular, these are obviously Russians with passports. In Russian society, not everybody has a passport. Typically speaking, if you have a passport, you are tending to be more educated. You are tending to be what is considered a first-class Russian citizen, somebody who's actually contributing to the economy and likely lives in the heartland, one of the main cities like Moscow or St. Petersburg. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people leaving Russian society, and it's the ones that are the best equipped to help Russia face the problems that they're going to face in the future. This is called a brain drain. It's nothing new in Russian history. They experienced a massive brain drain after the Soviet Union collapsed, and a lot of people who finally had the freedom to leave the country did so, and now they're experiencing a massive brain drain because of the war in Ukraine and all the effects surrounding it. But of course, it was even happening prior to that too. So the net that we see is a population crisis in Russia, though is not around 2.1.
I don't know if I mentioned it, but yeah, I think I did mention, right? About 12 hours ago, I was brain thinking about, how many people died in the Ukraine war. 1 million, about every quarter. Okay, but I think I might have forgotten to mention that, maybe an hour ago, I came up with, that I should look up what is the main reason for the Russia's issues, because in my franchise, spoiler, I'm going from country to country. I picked particular countries, but I didn't pick Russia. I picked Kazakhstan, but so I guess it's kind of Russia. That's true. But when I was picking the cities, I came up with when I was writing it out 35. And it would be 36 if you include the one I would, the hidden one. So when I was doing that list, it's perfect with the God number coming at 36. But yeah, actually, Russia would equate with Kazakhstan, so that would be there. But I was thinking, mainly, Putin's world, directly Russia. So it was after I finished the part 1 of Cape Town, Who Cares franchise, my Who Cares franchise, Cape Town, finished uploading it, actually finished processing it, while I was processing or while I was doing it. I think it was after I finished it, and then while I was processing, I thought, okay, I should think about Russia. And then about an hour afterwards, I'm watching this. This came in I simply clicked on home, you click here, YouTube, and it came up on the right hand side around here. Now I already had subscribed to the guy, I guess, so he might be in my feed already. I had clicked on the bell, but it wasn't the full bell, it was the open bell. When I clicked, after watching this, I clicked on full bell. Watching some of it. So this guy, he's popping up on my feed because maybe, through the algorithm, maybe that's why it's matching up so much. But the matchup for me, that I'm thinking, I should go do Russia an hour ago, and then would coincide of me thinking about 1 million. It maybe be ironic if his video is the one where he's the one mentioning 5K. I don't think it was his video though. It was someone else's channel mentioning 5K. I think it was 2 or 3 days ago. So those two coincided themselves. And then with the and then with the comment with the Russian tactic, you'll see what I mean. Okay, let me play it out. Actually, let me go back to the.
But instead is currently is a population.
But I almost didn't want to record this because there was so much coincidence that my brain was on the glutamate. My brain was filling up with so much thoughts with this that my brain's gonna explode. But yeah, I have to. Because this is so much coincidence. I have to do it.
Delete a large percentage of the Russian population.
Let me get this guy on the best. He got. Let me smack this up on at least, let's get on 1080. There we go.
This is happening for a lot of reasons. The birth rate is too low as it is. The death rate is increasing, and that's causing people to die before they can have children. Moscow or St. Petersburg. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people changing the borders over time, doing kind of what Russia does, getting a lot of ethnic Chinese in the area, and then declaring them into problems instead of solving them. Because of that, Russia has a huge immigration problem. In fact, if you dive into Russian political rhetoric, you will find a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric that is very similar to what you will find, for example, in the United States against immigrants that are coming over the southern border from Mexico, where Russians are very concerned in particular about Chinese immigrants immigrating over.
Yeah, interesting. They like China, but same with Europe. Europe with the Africa people coming up from Italy, going through Italy or wherever. It's the same thing. It's always the Southerners coming up north.
Over the border from China into Siberia because they are afraid of China basically culturally replacing them and then maybe even changing the borders over time, doing kind of what Russia does, getting a lot of ethnic Chinese in the area and then declaring them to invade to protect them, kind of like what Russia did to Georgia and kind of like what Russia did to Ukraine. And this doesn't help Russia's immigration problem either because it explicitly changing the borders over time, doing kind of what Russia does, getting a lot of ethnic Chinese in the area and then declaring them to invade to protect them, kind of like what Russia did to Georgia and kind of like what Russia did to Ukraine. And this doesn't help Russia's immigration problem either because it explicitly kind of attacks the main population of people that actually Ukraine. And this doesn't help Russia's immigration problem either because it explicitly kind of attacks the main population of people that actually might be interested in immigrating to Russia and populating some of its unpopulated areas. So for all these reasons and more, there are of people that actually might be interested in immigrating to Russia and populating some of its unpopulated areas. So for all these reasons and more, there are obvious incentives for people to not want to come into Russia. And at the same time, there are also obvious incentives for people to want to leave Russia. A big reason they lost so many young people after invading Ukraine. A lot of Russians are leaving the country. And in particular, these are obviously Russians with passports. In Russian society, not everybody has a passport. Typically speaking, if you have a passport, you are tending to be more educated. You are tending to be what is considered a first-class Russian citizen, somebody who's actually contributing to the economy and likely lives in the heartland, one of the main cities like Moscow or St. Petersburg. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people leaving Russian society, and it's the ones...
St. Petersburg. Excuse me. There's no pause button on this recording, so...
that are the best equipped to help Russia face the problems they're going to face in the future. This is called a brain drain. It's nothing new in Russian history. They experienced a massive brain drain after the Soviet Union collapsed, and a lot of people who finally had the freedom to leave the country did so, and now they're experiencing a massive brain drain because of the war in Ukraine and all the effects surrounding it. But of course, it was even happening prior to that too. So the net that we see is a population crisis in Russia that over the next couple generations is essentially going to delete a large percentage of the Russian population. This is happening for a lot of reasons. The birth rate is too low as it is. The death rate is increasing, and that's causing people to die before they can have children, especially because of the war in Ukraine. They have that migration of the people with skills and education leaving the country, not being replaced by enough immigrants, and even the immigrants that do come to the country typically don't have the level of education and skills as those leaving, because they're typically coming from Central Asia. They're lower skilled, and they're just looking for any opportunity that they can find. This is obviously a massive problem for Russia, and it means that the good news is I probably won't be making videos about Russia for the rest of my life. They are very quickly going to become sort of irrelevant on the world stage. What will be concerning is how that happens and what happens in the process of that. We're already seeing that today with Russia's war against Ukraine, which a lot of analysts have connected to Russia's demographic problem in several different ways. Some people say maybe Putin's goal was to give up on solving the demographic problem through the strategies he had tried, and to instead just try to capture Ukraine to solve the demographic problem. Maybe the idea was to absorb Ukraine into the Russian Empire and thereby boost Russian population numbers and improve the demography, at least on paper in terms of raw population. I don't necessarily buy that explanation, because to me, when I examine the psychology of Vladimir Putin, this does not seem like the kind of guy who would go into war and risk potentially losing his power to improve demography. Instead, I see Vladimir Putin as the kind of guy who would risk making an existing demographic problem, an existing population problem, even worse in order to gain power. So my theory, if this is all connected, is that Putin is attacking Ukraine now in a sort of use them while you got them mentality, a sort of last-ditch effort to use Russia's demography while he can to capture now, and a sort of use them while you got them mentality, a sort of last-ditch effort to use Russia's demography while he can to capture a portion of Ukraine. A final explanation might also make sense. For years, Russia's demographic problem, its population collapse, has been widely publicized within Russia itself, and the government has been unsuccessful at solving the problem. Putin's government. It is possible then, widely publicized within Russia itself, and the government has been unsuccessful at solving the problem. Putin's government. It is possible then, widely publicized within Russia. A final explanation might also make sense. For years, Russia's demographic problem, its population collapse, has been widely publicized within Russia itself, and the government has been unsuccessful at solving the problem. Putin's government. It is possible then that in attacking Ukraine, he is trying to distract from his failures at home and what has been the biggest domestic issue at home by pitting the people against an external opponent. That is very plausible, and it could be a combination of several of these factors. So looking at all this, what can we learn? I think one of the most important lessons we can learn is successful at solving the problem. Putin's government. It is possible then that in attacking Ukraine, he is trying to distract from his failures at home and what has been the biggest domestic issue at home by pitting the people against an external opponent. That is very plausible, and it could be a combination of several of these factors. So looking at all this, what can we learn? I think one of the most important lessons we can learn is that when we are having social problems within our own countries, we need to be very alert and very careful that politicians don't come in and start directing our attention towards external opponents and trying to make us angry at them for all the perceived problems in our society. It could very well be a tactic that they are using to not solve the problem, angry at them for all the perceived problems in our society. It could very well be a tactic that they are using to not solve the problem, but to just allow themselves to remain in power a little bit longer. Now that's why I do what I do.
Gosh, this guy's perfect. Wow. So, me thinking about an hour ago, what could be the main reason for Russia's problems in whammo? I'd simply, because I've gotten so fast at watching stuff, so I was like, okay, let's see what else to watch. I already watched my watch list. All of it. Whammo in the top right. I think it was, there's like 4 videos on the top, right? Right on the top 4. Top on the 4. And it was the second to right one. Oh, wow. Oh. That's, I'm always right almost, practically. That means the Wi-Fi could be the sun as the ultimate photon, the radio waves. But they want to wipe out the sun. Ukraine said something about, not Ukraine, UK says it wants to block the sun or something. But the sun is what is keeping us alive. It's not that. You don't want to do the wrong thing. The evil people always do the wrong thing. Such as Elon wanting to breed more. No, the whole reason why the population is going to collapse, when the main reason is because people overbred. So, the Wi-Fi is poisonous, even to these neurotypicals. But they're not intelligent enough to feel it. But it's killing them. It's really killing them. That Ryan of Geeks and Gamers, and this other guy he had, not a regular crew, not Jeremy, or not, there was this other guy. Ryan is doing a podcast on Geeks and Gamers with this other guy, and they were talking about, it was a recent one, about maybe 2 months ago, and he was talking about how he couldn't, something about his eyesight going blind or something. They're not really going blind, but in the future a lot of people are going to be blind. Most of the adults will be myopic. So basically, yes, conventionally in the ubiquitous sense, blind. It's already happening in China. I'm right. I know I'm right. This kind of thing always happens. You know, I'll be I don't want to say screaming at people, but I'll be telling people with so much passion, you know, do this, and they don't listen. You know, practically no one listens. I had one guy who was kind of he's got like a channel that does a lot of experiments. He created some kind of the world's brightest flashlight. He actually replied. He replied back to me. He actually listened. This guy has millions of followers, and he replied back to me. Incredible. But he listened. He actually listened. He at least replied something about, I don't know, something about eyesight. You know, I was telling him, you know, about his eyesight. He's got to protect his eyes, and I think it was some kind of positive comment he got back to me or something. I forgot what it was, but what the entailment was that he listened. But most people don't. This is why. I mean, that's one of the. What do you mean? What's one of the reasons? Most people don't listen. Why do I keep doing it? I don't have a choice. This is who I am. All right, let me keep playing this.
On this channel, so that when these types of things happen, I am analyzing them from the ground up to see if the words of the politicians match the reality. If you've appreciated that work, before you go, I'd like to ask for a quick favor. If you want to support the channel, you can become a patron. It's completely voluntary. It's just a way to support the work I do on this channel if you want to. You can scan the QR code on screen to learn more, or follow the link in the description of this video. With that in mind, that's all for this one. I'll see you on the next one.
This guy, I'll never forget him. Just as a false word. See, I keep now I'm talking about false words. But again, my videos have that just word because the AI. Oh gosh, what am I gonna do? Because the just word is all over my new vids, and I keep saying, oh, it's a false word. What am I gonna do? Oh, what in the world am I gonna do? It's a false word, and yet it's still my. I don't know. I don't know. I guess, as I said, if I gain more power doing my videos and I can delete it out, I'll see if I can do it. I'm not gonna go back and then I'm gonna revamp all. You know, I have to put comment in the. See, this is what I'm saying. Here's the thing. English is Germanic. It's already cursed. So I don't know. I'll figure it out. You know, if I was a genie, I could whammo, do a Thanos click. Not Thanos, don't use that. If I could do a click and simply change all my videos so they don't have all those what I consider false words, I would do it. But again, it all comes down to power. Okay, so anyway, let me play.
Is that when we are having social problems with our own countries,
let me play the beginning of this.
we need to be very alert and very careful that politicians don't come in and start directing our attention towards external opponents and trying to make us angry at them for all the perceived problems in our society. It could very well be a tactic that they are using to not solve the problem, but to just allow themselves to remain in power a little bit longer. Now that's why I do what I do on this channel, so that when these types of things happen, I am analyzing them from the ground up to see if the words of the politicians match the reality. If you've appreciated that work, before you go, I'd like to ask for a quick favor. If you want to support the channel, you can become a patron.
This is interesting. He used the just word, I know, but no, but that the thing is, he's using it. See what he's saying about longevity, resource. So it's like the government controlling, like the church controlling people, so they can use them up like a battery. Putin's doing this so he can stay relevant. Man, that is sad. All right, let's see.
Patron. It's completely match the reality. If you've appreciated this channel, it's a tactic that they are using to not solve the problem, but to just allow themselves to remain in power a little bit longer. No.
Wow. I mean, I guess he's got to do something, right? But he's doing the wrong thing. That's the thing.
When Russia started their full-scale invasion of Ukraine, there were approximately 7 million young men living in the country. Now, a little bit over 3 years later, there are only around 6 million young men living within the country.
So this is interesting. So Putin actually will lose. He'll lose. He knows it. This is not the tactic. I think it's because he doesn't understand. Does he? The flaws of the Bible. Once you know it's a control tactic, a bad control tactic. So I knew he could be defeated, because it's not even because of the Christianity thing. It's because looking at him, looking at his face, I see the fear in his eyes. I see the fear in his body language. It's fear. It's body language. This is how people have been able to figure out my mind when I don't speak it. All these years I've been thinking, for so long. How do they know what I'm thinking? And it's because of your body language. When you're absolutely not saying anything, your tone, anything, the way you move, any tiny micro expression, whammo. Look at my new franchise series. I don't even speak anymore, but it goes through from my body language. Anything you do could be millions of miles away. Well, people have to be a detective. You could be, 100 feet away, and people will pick up on that. Animals will pick up, the plants will pick up on everything. No one can truly lie. That's why you want to keep your head clear. Keep this thing mentally healthy and happy, because what's in here comes out side, shows up. All right, so let's go to this guy.
The country, a reduction of about 1 million, or 15% over the course of 3 years. From a number that was already drastically too small. These young men have been lost for obvious reasons. Some have been lost to the war. More have been lost to immigration as they leave the country. But in either case, Russia has lost a huge portion of the young men that they needed to run their economy. And it's actually even worse, because there are a lot of young men who have gone to the war in Ukraine who have become casualties and have been, unfortunately, disabled in combat. Which means that these people, from a purely financial pension standpoint, when it comes to a demographic problem, will now be net drawers from social support rather than net contributors, which from a purely financial standpoint, Russia already had a big problem with to begin with.
Does it only work for bald heads?
With the Flex series, I can show. When looking at the situation alongside Russia's existing problems with a declining birth rate and a missing generation of men, a lot of sociologists have concluded that within 6 to 10 years, Russia will completely lose its ability to conduct military offensives. Because as we know, Russia's preferred strategy for military offensives is to use a large number of ill-equipped people to rush objectives against opponents that are technologically superior. Russia will soon lose its ability to do this, and that could be a big reason as to why Russia is fighting its war against Ukraine now and is refusing to quit. They want to push forward at any cost, because from the crude math of a dictator, they want to use the young men while they have them, because in 6 to 10 years, they will not have young men to throw at the objective. In the mind of a dictator, a lost young man, whether he is lost on the battlefield or just simply doesn't exist due to a declining birth rate, is all the same when they are looking at these people merely as tools to achieve an objective. Bluntly stated, Russia's population is shrinking. Actually, it's collapsing. And the overall population is collapsing at the same time that there are more older people entering retirement age in Russian society due to increased longevity due to medicine and things like that. At the same time that more people in Russia are retiring and who will draw from Russia's pension system, there are fewer young people in Russia to actually work and produce incomes that will feed into that pension system. And all these stats together shows you the direction that Russia is going. The work behind this episode and several other episodes that I've been able to research and publish for free was made possible by my sponsor, Incogni. If you're like me, you're sick of spam calls, junk mail, and people selling your data. Incogni helps address the source of a lot of these junk messages, which is data brokers. These data brokers are in the business of collecting and selling your personal details. They can have all sorts of information, like your name, your address, your phone number, and often even your online browsing habits, which they then sell to anyone willing to pay. Marketers, background check sites, employers, landlords, or even health insurance companies looking to raise rates based on online browsing activity. So imagine if you were turned down for a job or a rental, or had to pay more for health insurance, all because someone purchased information about you that may have been outdated or incorrect. Incogni helps put a stop to this by removing your data from hundreds of data broker websites, a process that might otherwise take you hundreds of hours to complete on your own. All you have to do is sign up, give Incogni permission to act on your behalf, and they get right to work, finding, flagging, and demanding that your information be deleted. As someone with a large following with a lot of people who want my personal information, I have definitely gotten a lot of value by using data broker removal services. So I definitely recommend you check this out for yourself. If you want to, you can use my code WARBURG to get a massive 60% off an annual plan. So just scan the QR code on screen or follow.
That's interesting. Okay, so he's used the check word, which I consider false. He's used the adjustment false. But the interesting thing is he hasn't used a lot of false words. That's the thing. If people are smart, they don't use a lot of these what I consider false words. So it's interesting. He's falling to line. Not a lot of false words. Interesting. Very interesting. He hasn't used the word sure. He hasn't used the word certain. I don't know. Maybe he has. Major. I don't know. Maybe he has used major. I don't know. See, that's the thing. I mean, the thing that will ultimately, if there are good governments, yeah, I could go along with that. And I think there are, maybe. But then there's the words about confidence. You know, those words certain, probable, and probable. Those don't deal with government. Those deal with accuracy. So there's mainly two types of words. There's government words and there's confidence words. So when it comes to confidence, I don't know. That's another thing. So I think eventually it'd be like, what's his name? The guy who has autism. Eventually he simply accepted it. You know, he went along with it. But I think eventually I'll be able to see some kind of, I don't know. I see my arc going where I'll be able to go along. It's not even going along. I'll be able to understand something and come with some kind of epiphany. The best epiphany I've got right now on this is the fact that English is a cursed language, but Germanic-wise, that's only because of the Nazi thing. If you go back further, then of course there's the white thing, colonialism. I don't know. You know, German people, they're beautiful people. They are. They like the Hof. I love the Hof. But yeah. I mean, I love all races. So I don't know. I'll figure it out. But okay, let's go ahead.
Follow the link in the description, and again, use the code WARBURG to get 60% off an annual plan. For Russia, World War II led to some good things and some very, very bad things. And the worst thing that happened to Russia, arguably, at least as far as it extends into the modern day, is what is called the missing generation. The generation of people that every 20 years or so should technically exist, but doesn't.
I'm getting faster. That's a good thing. Because now that I realize I've actually succeeded in getting these videos down to really low megabyte. But if you see me kind of, shifting, I really want to get to mom and dad as soon as possible. So I'm racing against time here to get to my parents. I really want to see them before they're dead. So thankfully, my smart brain, I am able to stay on schedule.
Because the people who would have been their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents died in World War II and never gave birth to their children. In Russia, in 1923, if you were a boy that was born that year, the year that would have brought you into fighting age around the time of World War II, you only had a 20% chance of surviving to your 23rd birthday. Or in other words, only 1 in 5 boys that were born in Russia in 1923 were still alive in 1946. This was for a lot of reasons, of course, the war, famine, disease. But this arguably created ripple effects across Russian society that still exist to this very day, not just in terms of the lost generation, but in terms of social cohesion and what a missing generation of men does to a society. In Russia, even to this day, men have a very low life expectancy, and that's not even factoring in the war in Ukraine. Even leading up to the war in Ukraine, when Russia had no major catastrophic wars that took out a huge percentage of their population, the men had a very low life expectancy. And a lot of sociologists would say that this is in part due...
There you go, there's another false word, major. Now these might not actually be false words. Eventually I might figure out. When I say false, if it's government, that's definitely a government word. generals and other.
To rampant alcoholism. Actually, it's indisputable that it's due to rampant alcoholism, but they will say that the rampant alcoholism is in part due to this missing generation of men.
And due might be the alcoholism again with my theory of control, some kind of drug, food control. There it is. The economy of insider trading, and that the V.
Men, which leads to a lot of boys growing up also without fathers. And when you grow up without a father, that leads to certain social trends that can amplify with each generation. And it can actually take 3 or 4 generations for those effects to be reversed, even if you are moving on a good trajectory. And Russia hasn't been moving on a good trajectory.
Okay, so he's used a significant amount of false words now, but he's coincided with me completely. This is the interesting. This reminds me of when I was at the IT company near here, IT service company, and there was a guy. I said he looked the ponytail. He looked like Jesus, and then he looked up instantly from the inside, and he saw on the monitor said Jesus because one of the customers' name was Jesus, and he pointed that he was smiling, kind of laughing. What was he? Well, he was smiling, and he told me, and I was wow. And then he used a false word. I think he used the probably or something. Not probably. He's certain. I don't know. He used some kind of false word. Maybe it was just or something. I don't know. So the Bible has something, says when you're at your highest, that's when the Bible, paraphrasing, that's when the Satan, when you're most vulnerable to Satan. But I think it might be that these aren't false words. So I could be incorrect because if I have this kind of coincidental, I don't know. That's the thing, isn't it? You have a miracle thing that happens, but at the same time, it conflicts with what you believe in. Well, something conflicts within this miracle. This guy coincided so much with me, and yet he's using all what I consider false words. So it's an interesting balance, but maybe it's a revelation of sorts. Elon used so much of those what I consider false words. I was like, okay, this guy, something's off. I knew he was off the first time I saw him. I swore he was an Iron Man. But then again, a lot of people that I'm coinciding with or that I have respect for are using a lot of these words, I think. So in the past, when I said I didn't, in the past, it's like, even I used some of these false words. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. Maybe because I didn't realize they were false words. I think it's mainly the confidence words. Maybe that's it. Because this confidence word, you used such oh sure and just and probably. Maybe that's the thing. When people know something, they don't use probably. That's the whole thing. If you're smart, you don't use probably. You say, if you're really smart, But then, I don't know, maybe I have good memory though, especially when I was younger. So what is it? But there's a lot of lies, isn't it? You don't realize the lies. So maybe those people who I thought were smart are actually not smart. Maybe that's it. I know they were smart, they're not smart. All lies, so many lies in society. And then now the truth being revealed. So so many more revelations than ever. I don't know. I'll figure it out. All right.
3. Because this missing generation of men, causes a lot of this to repeat every 20 years or so. This contributes heavily to what even Vladimir Putin himself has acknowledged is Russia's biggest problem, which is Russia's demographic problem, which includes this missing generation of men, but is not exclusive to it. There are other problems that in some ways are equally as large that feed into this. This means that Russia is declining in a way that is indisputable, and that precedes even their war against Ukraine. All of these problems that I'm discussing existed in Russia long before they invaded Ukraine, and have only been made worse by the war in Ukraine, exponentially so. Some even argue that this problem is a partial cause for the war in Ukraine, with Russia trying to turn its attention outwards to address the growing social uncertainty within their own country, by assigning blame to somebody other than themselves. But in either case, it does mean growing social uncertainty within their own country, by assigning blame to somebody other than themselves. But in either case, it does mean that regardless of the outcome of the war,
Case, so he's used argue in case, what I would consider false, but uncertainty. Yeah, he's using a ton of them. Yeah, this guy matched up. Hey, he's got shades on, smart. Yeah, so someone said one comment, maybe last year, said it's psychosis. Could be it's because of the way my brain thinks. It needs determination. I can't have what they call uncertainty. I have to know. But that's the thing. The more I know and understand, the more I can accept it, or even go along with it, or understand, or be within. I can be viable with it. Yeah. All right.
Ukraine, whether Russia wins that war or loses, as seems more likely, Russia's state of decline is still going to continue, and in a generation or two, Russia will no longer be recognizable as the world power it is today. The reason Russia has such a big problem right now is because of three main factors. The first, I already mentioned, which is a declining birth rate. The second is an increasing death rate. And the third is net immigration, where more Russians want to leave Russia than people from other countries want to come into Russia. It is really the combination of the three factors that makes the crisis for Russia so extreme. When, for example, you look at the United States also has a very low birth rate, below replacement level. But the United States experiences a lot of immigration, which in the case of the United States is a good thing, because it prevents the country from reaching the point where they have more pensioners than they have workers who are able to contribute to the system. In Russia's case, this is not so, and the system gets progressively more and more overloaded from a demographic perspective with each passing
case. Another word case. False word case.
Here, for a birth rate to be considered at replacement level, or rather, fertility rate is the proper term, it needs to sit at approximately 2.1 births per woman, because that woman has to replace herself, her husband, and account for the unfortunate event where many people die before they give birth to their own children. In Russia, the birth rate, though, is not around 2.1, but instead is currently around 1.5. So from the beginning, Russia is not putting enough new people into their society. The Russian government definitely acknowledges this, and has tried to do so in a lot of strange ways, which actually, funnily enough, are now being repeated in the United States as of just a couple weeks before I filmed this video, where Russia is trying to incentivize women to have more children through financial incentives and social programs. Basically, they try to encourage childbirth across the nation socially, and they try to encourage women to give birth to more children by having financial incentives. That, of course, doesn't necessarily work, because the government, if they give you a pretty low sum, let's just say $5,000 US, that is not enough for a mother who otherwise would not have given birth to decide, hey, I'm going to go have a kid just so I can get $5,000, because, of course, raising a child costs far more money and far more effort than that. Instead, the reason for a declining birth rate, there are several, but usually it is a social degradation, where people do not feel as well off as their parents were, and so they themselves do not want to bring more children into that world, or they feel like they have to work harder before they're at a financial level where they feel capable of taking care of a child, and so they delay giving birth to children until they're older, and that causes them to have less children overall. Whatever the case, Russia has been desperately trying to address their low birth rate, but they have been unsuccessful, or at best only marginally successful, and they are far from solving their problem. For the death rate, Russia has another problem, a high death rate, particularly among young men, who die at twice the rate of Europeans. In fact, in Russia, young men are expected to live about 6 years less than somebody who lives in Bangladesh, which is famously an extremely poverty-stricken nation that is also stricken by heavy natural disasters, flooding, hurricanes, things like that. Russia...
Oh my gosh, it's a 22-minute video. Okay, but at twice the speed, it's 10 minutes. So I must admit, this is going to be 20 minutes. Hopefully only 500, half a gig.
Men have an average life expectancy of around 68 years old. And for Russia, this is a problem, because unlike the birth rate, they aren't...
I'm talking about my recording, not his. Yeah.
Really doing anything to address the death rate. Obviously, pursuing a war against Ukraine is not doing them any favors, but there's another reason the death rate in Russia is so high, and it's actually the primary reason I've already mentioned, which is alcoholism. And in Russia, there is a long history with alcoholism that gives the Russian state little incentive to actually reverse this. Alcohol is used as a form of control in Russia. It's a way for the Russian state to keep people at the lower rungs of society happier so that they don't rebel against the nation. And that's a tradition that has gone back to the early days of the Russian Empire, where one of the only mass-produced items in the Russian Empire was vodka, that the Tsar, the state, subsidized to ensure that all the peasants could afford it, so that they would be in a constant state of drunkenness. Russia has tried to reverse that trend in society, even by banning alcohol, but every time they get a new leader who wants to be despotic, like Vladimir Putin, those trends get reversed. Even though Vladimir Putin doesn't drink himself, he has a brand of vodka called Putinka vodka. It's a whole crazy situation. In Russia, the vodka bottles, in fact, are designed with a cap that cannot be resealed, because the expectation is that you will consume all of that vodka in one sitting. So this rampant alcoholism, which is increasing the death rate in Russia, Russia as a state has no real incentive to help solve that problem, because they actually see it as a benefit, and arguably it is something that they do on purpose. With all this in mind, Russia's only real hope is migration, convincing people from other countries to come into their society to boost their population levels. And this is a really tough sell for Russia, because Russia is an ethnic monoculture. In Russia, some 72% or so of the entire population is considered ethnic Russian. This is a major deterrent to immigration to Russia. Some 72% or so of the entire population is considered ethnic Russian. This is a major deterrent to immigration to Russia, because people typically don't want to immigrate to a country.
This is the major word, false word.
where they will be seen very clearly as an outsider. People, when they're immigrating to a country, it is already an uncomfortable situation where they're in a place that is not their homeland, where they don't know the customs, they may not know the language, they certainly don't know the culture. And the way Russia is designed amplifies those problems instead of solving them. Because of that, Russia has a huge immigration problem.
Certain and probable.
In fact, if you dive into Russian political rhetoric, you will find a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric that is very similar to what you will find, for example, in the United States against immigrants that are coming over the southern border from Mexico, where Russians are very concerned in particular about Chinese immigrants immigrating over the border from China into Siberia because they are afraid of China basically culturally replacing them and then maybe even changing the borders over time, doing kind of what Russia does, getting a lot of ethnic Chinese in the area and then declaring them to invade
Okay, I think we've cycled back to where I was before, but let me play it out.
to protect them, kind of like what Russia did to Georgia and kind of like what Russia did to Ukraine. And this doesn't help Russia's immigration problem either because it explicitly kind of attacks the main population of people that actually might be interested in immigrating to Russia and populating some of its unpopulated areas. So for all these reasons and more, there are obvious incentives for people to not want to come into Russia. And at the same time, there are also obvious incentives for people to want to leave Russia. A big reason they lost so many young people after invading Ukraine. A lot of Russians are leaving the country. And in particular, these are obviously Russians with passports. In Russian society,
Okay, yeah, we've circled back to where I was before. So, alright. Hopefully it's all recording, so let's